I never imagined that the man I loved could destroy me so completely, that every promise he made was just another way to drag me deeper into darkness, that the bruises on my skin would become the least of my scars. I thought I knew what rock bottom looked like, until I found myself stealing from the one person who could have helped me, losing everything I'd ever worked for, and watching strangers take my children from my arms. But what I didn't know then, what nobody could have told me, was that the worst betrayal wasn't the one I thought I was living through. It was something far more devastating, hiding in plain sight. If you're new here, welcome to Every Smile Hides a Story. We share real stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary situations. This channel is just getting started, and we're committed to bringing you new stories every single day. Stories that remind us all that things aren't always what they seem. If you'd like to join us on this journey, please consider subscribing. Now, let me tell you what happened to me. My name is Yosani. I was 23 years old when my life fell apart, though if I'm being honest, it had been crumbling for years. I just didn't want to see it. Paco and I got married when I was 19. Too young, too naive, too desperate to believe that someone could love me. We lived in a cramped apartment in a neighborhood where the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbors' arguments as clearly as your own thoughts. The paint was peeling. The windows didn't close all the way. In winter, cold air would seep through the cracks, and in summer, the heat was suffocating. But it was ours, and for a while, that felt like enough. I worked at a laundromat during those early days. The smell of detergent and steam would cling to my clothes, my hair, my skin. Paco worked construction, or at least he was supposed to. He'd come home with calloused hands and dirt under his nails, and I'd believe him when he said the pay was coming next week. But the money never seemed to arrive. There was always an excuse. The boss was late. The check bounced. They'd pay him tomorrow. I wanted so badly to believe him that I ignored the obvious signs. The smell of beer on his breath at 10 in the morning, the way his eyes wouldn't meet mine when he talked about work, the growing stack of overdue bills on our kitchen counter. Then our son was born, Mateo. 6 pounds, 7 ounces of pure hope. I remember holding him for the first time in that hospital room, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine and thinking, everything will be different now. We'll be different. The nurse had smiled at me, said something about new beginnings, and I'd nodded through tears, believing every word. I was wrong. Paco started drinking more after Mateo arrived. At first it was just a beer or two after work, or what he claimed was work. Then it was a bottle, then 2. Then he'd stumble home at midnight, sometimes later, reeking of cheap whiskey, his eyes unfocused and mean. The money that should have gone to diapers and formula went to the bar down the street, the one with the flickering neon sign that cast red shadows on the sidewalk. I'd try to reason with him, beg him to stop, and he'd look at me with such contempt it made my stomach turn. "You think you're better than me?" he'd say, his voice thick and slurred. "You're nothing. You're lucky I even look at you." The first time he hit me, I told myself it was an accident. We'd been arguing about money, about Mateo's doctor appointment that we couldn't afford, and his hand had come out of nowhere. The slap echoed in our tiny apartment. My cheek burned. He'd looked shocked for a moment, then angry, then he'd stormed out. I stood there with my hand pressed to my face, tears streaming down, telling myself it wouldn't happen again. The second time, I made excuses. He was stressed. He'd had a bad day. I shouldn't have pushed him. By the 10th time, I stopped counting. I just learned to duck, to stay quiet, to make myself small. I learned which subjects would set him off, which tone of voice would earn me a shove or worse. Mateo would cry from his crib, and I'd rock him with shaking hands, whispering promises I didn't know how to keep. Sometimes I'd sing to him, old lullabies my grandmother had taught me, and pretend we were somewhere else entirely. I got a job cleaning house for a wealthy family across town, the Corcueras. Getting there meant 2 buses and a 40-minute commute, but the pay was better than the laundromat. The mother, Señora Dolores, was exactly what you'd expect. Cold, imperious, treating me like I was invisible unless she needed something. She'd leave notes about spots I'd missed, tasks I'd forgotten, always in that crisp, judgmental handwriting. Her house was enormous, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, rooms that seemed to go on forever. I'd walk through those halls and feel like I was in a different world, one where people didn't worry about whether they could afford milk. But her son, Ivan, was different. He was in his late 20s, worked in finance or something corporate. I never fully understood what he did. He'd come home during his lunch break sometimes, and he'd ask how I was doing. Not in the polite, automatic way people do, but like he actually wanted to know. He'd notice when I looked tired, when I moved slower than usual. Once, on a particularly hot day, he brought me a glass of water with ice and a slice of lemon without me asking, and I almost cried at the simple humanity of it. It had been so long since anyone had shown me basic kindness. The pay wasn't much, but it kept us afloat. Barely. Paco would take most of it before I could hide any away. I'd tried opening a bank account he didn't know about, but he'd found the paperwork and beaten me so badly I couldn't get out of bed for 2 days. After that, I stopped trying. I'd plead with him. Mateo needs medicine. We need food. And he'd laugh in my face. That cruel laugh that sounded more like a bark. Then get more money, he'd say. You work in a mansion. They have everything. They won't even notice. That's when the stealing started. Small things at first. A silver spoon from a drawer I was cleaning. Some cash from a purse left on the counter. 20 pesos. Nothing that would be missed immediately. I hated myself every time. My hands would shake as I slipped items into my pocket, my heart pounding so hard I was sure someone would hear it. I'd go home and hand everything to Paco, and he'd count it with greedy eyes, already planning how to spend it at the bar. Mateo's hungry cries were louder than my conscience. When my baby woke up in the middle of the night, whimpering because his stomach hurt, because we had no formula left, I'd tell myself I had no choice. Paco would take what I brought home, spend it at the bar, and come back demanding more. The cycle tightened around my throat like a noose, pulling tighter every day until I couldn't breathe. I started to recognize the pattern. I'd steal on Monday, hand it over to Paco on Monday night, and by Wednesday he'd be angry again, demanding more. By Friday, if I hadn't brought anything new, he'd get violent. Once, he grabbed my hair and dragged me across the apartment floor because I'd only managed to take 10 pesos from Señora Dolores' bedroom. The carpet burned my knees. Mateo watched from his playpen, silent and wide-eyed, and that look on his face, that fear, haunts me still. One night, Paco came home drunker than I'd ever seen him. He could barely walk straight, kept bumping into walls. He grabbed me by the hair, dragged me to the bedroom, and pinned me against the wall. His breath was hot and sour on my face, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. "You're useless," he hissed. "You can't even steal right. Maybe I should go to that rich family myself, tell them what you've been doing, see how generous they feel then." Fear paralyzed me. If Yvonne found out, I'd lose the job. We'd lose the apartment. We'd have nothing. So I did what Paco wanted. I stole more. Jewelry. Cash. Small valuables that might not be missed immediately. A gold bracelet from Señora Dolores' jewelry box. An expensive pen from Yvonne's desk. A decorative clock from the library. Each theft carved out a piece of my soul, but I told myself I had no choice. I had to protect Mateo. I had to survive. Except I didn't realize I was already drowning. We lost the apartment 2 months later. Paco had stopped paying rent, using the money for alcohol instead. I came home from work one day, exhausted and aching, to find our belongings on the street. The landlord was changing the locks, and when I begged him to give us more time, he just shook his head. "I gave you 3 warnings, he said. "I can't do this anymore." I stood there with Mateo in my arms, staring at our life in garbage bags, and felt the last bit of hope drain out of me. Neighbors walked past without looking at us. A dog sniffed at one of our bags. The sun was setting, painting everything orange and red, and I thought, this is it. This is how we end. We moved into a shelter. The room was barely big enough for a bed, and the walls were damp with mold that left dark stains in the corners. You could hear everything. People fighting, babies crying, the constant shuffle of footsteps overhead. Mateo got sick almost immediately. A cough that rattled in his tiny chest. A fever that wouldn't break no matter how many times I pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. I begged Paco to use what little money we had for a doctor, but he disappeared for 3 days and came back empty-handed, smelling like he'd been sleeping in a gutter. That's when I discovered I was pregnant again. I remember sitting on the edge of that sagging bed, the pregnancy test trembling in my hands, and feeling nothing but despair. The plastic stick felt heavy as a stone. How could I bring another child into this nightmare? How could I protect 2 babies when I couldn't even protect 1? I thought about ending the pregnancy. I even made an appointment at a clinic, but when the day came, I couldn't go through with it. Not because of morality or religion, but because somewhere deep inside, I still had a tiny spark of hope that things might get better. They didn't. The pregnancy was brutal. I was malnourished, exhausted, terrified. My body ached constantly. I'd get dizzy spells at work, have to sit down before I fainted. I kept working, kept stealing, kept trying to hold everything together with hands that couldn't stop shaking.
Ivan noticed I was pregnant, hard not to with my growing belly, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Concern, maybe even sadness. He asked me once if everything was okay at home, and I lied through my teeth, said everything was fine. My husband was just working a lot. The words tasted like ash. I gave birth in the shelter, on that same sagging bed, with only a neighbor woman to help me. Her name was Rosa, and she'd had 6 children of her own.
No doctor, no hospital, no relief from the pain that tore through me like I was being ripped apart. The contractions started at midnight, and by dawn I was screaming, begging for it to be over. Rosa held my hand and told me to breathe, to push, to keep going. My daughter came into the world screaming, and I held her against my chest and sobbed, not with joy, but with grief so heavy I thought it might crush us both. I named her Sophia. She was perfect. She was doomed. Paco barely looked at her. He was too busy drinking, too busy making my life hell, too busy reminding me that I was worthless and pathetic and beneath him. When Sophia was 3 days old, he told me she was probably not even his, that I was probably sleeping around. The accusation was so absurd, so cruel, that I just stared at him. I had no energy left to defend myself. I tried to care for both children, but I was failing. Mateo's cough got worse. Sophia wouldn't stop crying, that high-pitched wail that echoed off the walls and drove me to the edge of sanity. I had no money, no food, no way out. I'd look at my babies and think, I'm failing you. I'm failing at the one thing I'm supposed to be good at. Then the social workers came. Someone at the shelter had reported us. Reported me. I never found out who. Reported that the children weren't being properly cared for, that we were living in squalor, that I was unfit. 2 women in clean clothes with clipboards and sympathetic eyes stood in that tiny room and told me they were taking my babies. One was older, with gray hair pulled back in a bun. The other was younger, couldn't have been more than 30, and she had tears in her eyes as she explained what was happening. No, I begged. Please, no. I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can. Please don't take them. But they did. They pried Mateo from my arms while he screamed for me, his little hands reaching out, his voice breaking on the word mama. They took Sophia from where she lay sleeping, wrapped in the only clean blanket I had left. I collapsed on the floor, howling like an animal, and Paco just stood there watching, his face blank and indifferent. When I looked up at him, expecting something, anger, sadness, anything, he just shrugged and walked out. I heard him on the stairs whistling. That night, I wanted to die. I stood on the roof of the shelter, looking down at the street below. The city lights blurred through my tears. Cars passed. People walked. Life continued like nothing had happened, like my world hadn't just ended. I thought about how easy it would be to just step forward and let gravity do the rest. The only thing that stopped me was the image of Mateo's face, the way he'd reached for me as they carried him away. If I died, who would fight to get him back? The next morning, everything changed. Ivan showed up at the shelter. I don't know how he found me. Maybe he'd asked around. Maybe he'd followed me once. Maybe it was just luck. But there he was, standing in the doorway, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. He was dressed for work, suit and tie, completely out of place in this building that smelled of mildew and desperation. "Yosani," he said quietly, "I need to talk to you." My stomach dropped. He knows. He knows about the stealing. I opened my mouth to confess, to beg for mercy, to promise I'd pay everything back somehow, but he held up a hand. "I know things have been taken from our house," he said. "My mother noticed. She wanted to call the police, but I asked her to wait." Tears burned my eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't have a choice. I know about Paco," Ivan interrupted. His voice was steady, but there was anger beneath it. Not at me, I realized, but for me. I've known for a while. I've seen the bruises. I've heard things. and I've been trying to figure out how to help you without making things worse." I stared at him, uncomprehending. The words didn't make sense. How could he have known? Why hadn't he said anything? "My mother doesn't know this," he continued, "but I've been keeping track of what was taken. Not to build a case against you, to understand what you needed. And Yosani, what you needed was a way out." He stepped closer, and I saw tears in his own eyes. "I should have done something sooner," he said. "I should have asked more questions, pushed harder. I saw the signs and I told myself it wasn't my business. I failed you, but I'm not going to fail you anymore." That's when he told me his plan. He'd already contacted a lawyer, already started the process to help me get my children back. He'd arranged for me to stay in a safe apartment, one Paco couldn't find. He'd make sure I had food, clothes, medical care, everything I needed to rebuild, and he wasn't asking for anything in return. He just wanted to help. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Ivan smiled sadly. "Because everyone deserves a second chance. Because I saw you trying so hard to survive, and I can't just walk away from that. Because it's the right thing to do. Because," he paused, looked down, "because I have resources I don't deserve, and you have nothing through no fault of your own. That doesn't seem right to me." The next few months were a blur of court dates, therapy sessions, and small victories. Ivan kept his word. He hired a lawyer named Patricia who specialized in family law, a woman with fierce eyes and a gentle voice who treated me like I mattered. She helped me navigate the legal system, helped me prove that I could provide a stable home for my children. We had to document everything: Paco's abuse, my efforts to find work, the conditions at the shelter, the stealing that had been done under duress. It was humiliating, laying my life bare like that, but Patricia never judged me. She just kept pushing forward. When Paco found out what was happening, he tried to fight it. He showed up at one of the hearings, drunk and belligerent, claiming I was an unfit mother, that I was a thief, that he was the victim in all of this. The judge took one look at him, swaying on his feet, slurring his words, reeking of alcohol, and ordered him removed from the courtroom. After that, his alcoholism and history of abuse worked against him. The court ordered a restraining order. Eventually, he gave up and disappeared. Last I heard, he'd moved to another city and drank himself into oblivion there. Part of me felt guilty for not feeling worse about it, but mostly, I just felt relief. I moved into the apartment Ivan had arranged. It was small but clean, in a quiet neighborhood with trees lining the street. There was a park nearby where children played. The walls were freshly painted white. The floors didn't creak. The windows had curtains that actually closed. I walked through those rooms the first day and cried, overwhelmed by the simple dignity of having a safe place to sleep. Ivan helped me find a job at a community center, working with children. The pay was modest but steady. I started therapy with a counselor named Dr. Martinez, working through the trauma, the shame, the guilt. It was hard work. Some days I'd leave her office feeling worse than when I arrived. All the old wounds torn open again. But slowly, I started to heal. I started to see that I wasn't a bad person, just a person who'd been in a terrible situation and made desperate choices. I got my children back on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The social worker brought them to the new apartment, and when Mateo saw me, he ran into my arms so fast he nearly knocked me over. He'd gotten bigger, his hair longer, but his eyes were the same. "Mama," he said, and the word was like a prayer answered. Sophia was bigger now too, her eyes bright and curious, and when I held her close, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Ivan was there too. He'd helped set up the apartment, made sure there were toys for the kids, food in the fridge, clean sheets on the beds. He'd bought Mateo a stuffed bear, and Sophia a soft blanket. And as I watched him play with Mateo, getting down on the floor to build block towers, making my son laugh for the first time in months, I realized something. This man had seen the worst of me, my theft, my desperation, my brokenness, and he'd chosen compassion. He'd chosen to believe I was more than my worst moments. He'd chosen to give me a chance to become the person I wanted to be. We didn't fall in love right away. Love isn't built on rescue. It's built on respect, on time, on showing up day after day and choosing each other. But slowly, carefully, we built something real. Ivan would come by on weekends, bring groceries, play with the kids. We'd talk after they went to bed, about everything and nothing. about our childhoods and our dreams and our fears. He told me about his mother's expectations, about feeling trapped in a life he didn't choose. I told him about my grandmother who'd raised me, about the girl I'd been before Paco, about the woman I was trying to become. He never judged me for my past. He never held the stealing over my head. He just walked beside me as I learned to stand on my own again. When I had nightmares about losing the children, he'd stay on the phone with me until I calmed down. When I doubted myself, worried I was failing as a mother, he'd remind me of how far I'd come. He was patient in a way I didn't know men could be. A year later, we got married. It was a small ceremony in the park near my apartment, just us and the kids and a few close friends. Patricia the lawyer was there, and Dr. Martinez, and Rosa from the shelter who'd helped deliver Sophia. Mateo stood next to us in a little suit that made him look impossibly grown up, holding Sophia's hand. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Mateo said loudly, "Nope, we like Ivan." Everyone laughed, and I cried happy tears for the first time in my life. Real, genuine tears of joy. But the story doesn't end there. A few months after the wedding, I got a call from a woman named Andrea. She'd heard about my story through mutual connections. Someone at the community center where I worked had told someone else, and word had spread. Andrea wanted to meet me. When we sat down for coffee at a little cafe downtown, she told me about her own journey, about her abusive husband Gustavo, about her struggles with infertility, about her work as a housekeeper. She told me about falling in love with someone she thought she couldn't have, about giving birth in secret, about losing her child and finding him years later. As I listened, I realized we'd both walked through fire. We'd both been broken by people who were supposed to love us. We'd both done things we weren't proud of just to survive. And we'd both found our way back to light through the kindness of others. Andrea's story was different from mine in the details, but the core was the same. Desperation, shame, rescue, redemption. We talked for 3 hours that first day. The coffee went cold. The cafe filled and emptied around us. When we finally left, we exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. And we did. Andrea and I became close friends. Our children played together. We shared meals, swapped stories, supported each other through hard days. She understood things about me that even Ivan couldn't, because she'd lived it too. She knew what it was like to steal because you had no other choice. She knew what it was like to be judged for poverty, to be treated as less than human because you didn't have money. She knew what it was like to fight your way back to dignity. Sometimes, when we sat on my porch watching the kids run around the yard, I'd think about how far we'd come, how we'd survived things that should have destroyed us, how we'd been given second chances we never thought we deserved. Andrea's son, Angelito, would play with Mateo and Sofia, and you could hear their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. That sound, pure, innocent joy, was the sound of redemption. I still think about those dark days sometimes. I think about the woman I was, scared, desperate, stealing to survive. I think about Paco's cruelty, about the shelter, about the moment they took my children away. The memories don't hurt quite as much anymore, but they're still there, woven into the fabric of who I am. And I think about Ivan, standing in that doorway, offering me a hand up instead of turning away. I think about how easily he could have called the police, pressed charges, let me face the consequences alone, but he didn't. The truth I learned is this: we all make mistakes when we're drowning. We all do things we're ashamed of when survival is the only option. But those mistakes don't define us. What defines us is whether we accept help when it's offered, whether we do the work to heal, whether we choose to become better even when it's hard. We are not our worst moments. We are what we do after them. Mateo is 7 now. Sophia is 5. They're happy, healthy, loved. They don't remember the shelter or the hunger or the fear. They just remember being wanted, being safe, being home. When Mateo asks me about his biological father, which he does occasionally, I tell him the truth in age-appropriate words. He wasn't able to be the dad you deserved, but you have a dad now who chooses you every single day, and that's what matters. That's the other truth I learned. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up. It's the people who see your worst and choose to stay. It's the people who believe in your second chance, even when you've stopped believing in it yourself. Ivan legally adopted both children a year after we got married. The day the judge finalized it, Mateo asked if he could change his last name. "I want to be a Corcuera," he said, "like you and Papa." We cried through the whole ceremony. I work now as a counselor for women in situations like mine. Women trapped in abusive relationships. Women struggling to feed their children. Women who feel like they have no way out. The community center hired me full-time once I completed my certification. I tell them my story. I tell them about the stealing, the shame, the moment I hit bottom. And then I tell them about Yvonne, about second chances, about the possibility of rebuilding. I don't sugarcoat anything. I don't pretend it's easy. But I show them that it's possible. Some of them don't believe me at first. They've been beaten down too long, told they're worthless too many times. I see myself in their eyes, that hollow look, that resignation, that bone-deep exhaustion. But I keep showing up. I keep telling them there's a way forward. And sometimes, when I see that flicker of hope in their eyes, when they start to believe that maybe, just maybe, they deserve better, I remember the woman I used to be and feel grateful beyond words. Last month, one of the women I counsel, Maria, a young mother with 2 kids, finally left her abusive partner. She called me at 2 a.m, terrified, asking if she could stay with me until she found a shelter placement. I drove to pick her up, her kids asleep in the back seat, and set her up in our guest room. Yvonne never questioned it. He just helped carry the children inside, made up the bed, put fresh towels in the bathroom. Maria stayed with us for 2 weeks until we found her a safe place. When she left, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for showing me it's possible." That moment, that gratitude, is why I do this work. Andrea and I still meet for coffee every week, usually on Thursday mornings after we drop the kids at school. We've been talking about writing a book together, sharing our stories with a wider audience. Maybe it'll help someone. Maybe it'll give another woman the courage to leave, to ask for help, to believe she deserves better. Maybe it'll remind people that behind every bad decision is a human being trying to survive, a person with hopes and fears and circumstances beyond their control. We've started outlining it. Working title, 2 Mothers. It'll tell both our stories, the parallels and the differences, the darkness and the light. Andrea writes beautifully, better than me, honestly, and I think she'll be able to capture the emotional truth of what we lived through. We've already talked to a small publisher who's interested. The advance won't be much, but that's not the point. The point is reaching women who need to know they're not alone. Last week, Yvonne and I were sitting on the couch after the kids went to bed. He was reading a book about economics or finance, something I'd never understand, and I was just watching him. This man who'd saved my life without expecting anything in return. The lamp cast warm light across his face. Outside, I could hear crickets chirping. It was one of those perfect, quiet moments that make you grateful to be alive. He looked up and caught me staring. "What?" he asked, smiling. "I'm just grateful," I said. "For you. For this. For everything." He set his book down and took my hand. His fingers were warm, steady. "I'm grateful too. You made me better, Yosani. You taught me that kindness isn't just a nice idea. It's a choice we make every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." I thought about that. About how he'd chosen kindness when he could have chosen punishment. About how that one choice had changed everything. Not just for me, but for my children. For Andrea, who I met because of him. For all the women I now help at the community center. One act of compassion, rippling outward in ways we couldn't have predicted. That's what I want people to understand. Kindness isn't always easy. It's not always convenient. Sometimes it costs us something. Money, time, comfort, peace of mind. Yvonne spent thousands helping me. Hours driving me to court dates. Emotional energy supporting me through breakdowns. But it's always worth it. Because when we choose compassion over judgment, when we choose to see the person behind the mistakes, when we choose to offer a hand instead of turning away, that's when we become fully human. That's when we tap into something bigger than ourselves. I'm not perfect now. I still have hard days. I still carry scars from those years with Paco. Physical scars on my ribs where he kicked me, emotional scars that run deeper. I still wake up sometimes from nightmares about losing my children, about being back in that shelter, about Paco finding us. On those nights, Yvonne holds me until I stop shaking, reminds me that I'm safe, that we're all safe. But I'm healing. I'm growing. I'm learning that I'm worth more than I ever believed, that my past doesn't have to dictate my future, that there's always a path forward if we're brave enough to take it. Sophia started kindergarten this year. On her first day, she insisted on wearing a yellow dress with butterflies on it, her hair in 2 pigtails. She looked so small standing at the school entrance, her backpack almost as big as she was. She turned around and waved at us, me, Yvonne, and Mateo, with the biggest smile on her face. No fear, just excitement. And I thought, this is what winning looks like. This is what all that suffering was for. Mateo is doing well too. He's in 2nd grade now, gets good grades, has friends. He's learning to play soccer, and Yvonne coaches his team on weekends. Sometimes I stand on the sidelines and watch them together. Yvonne showing Mateo how to kick. Mateo's face lit up with concentration and joy, and I feel overwhelmed with gratitude. This could have gone so differently. My children could have grown up in foster care, damaged and lost. Instead, they're thriving, but I'm under no illusions. I know we're lucky. I know that for every woman who gets a second chance, there are dozens who don't. I know that not everyone has an Ivan in their life, someone with resources and compassion and willingness to help. That's why the work I do matters. That's why Andrea and I are writing our book. Because we can't save everyone, but we can tell our stories and hope they reach the right person at the right time. Sometimes women come to the community center and they're not ready to leave. They're not ready to believe they deserve better, and I don't push them. I just make sure they know where I am, that my door is open, that when they're ready, I'll be there. Because that's what Yvonne did for me. He waited until I was ready to accept help, and then he was there. Pushing someone before they're ready often just drives them deeper into the situation they're trying to escape. So if you're reading this and you're in a dark place, if you're trapped, if you're scared, if you're doing things you never thought you'd do just to survive, please know this: you're not alone. There are people who will help you if you let them. There are second chances waiting if you're brave enough to reach for them. There are better days ahead, even when you can't see them yet. I promise you this is true because I lived it. I was in the darkest place imaginable, and I found my way out. You can too. And if you're someone who has the power to help, someone who sees another person struggling, please don't look away. Don't judge. Don't assume you know their whole story. Just offer a hand. Ask how you can help. Be the person who believes in second chances. Because you never know. You might be the one thing standing between someone and complete despair. You might be the difference between darkness and light. You might be someone's Yvonne, the person they tell stories about years later, the person who changed everything. Stories like mine don't always have happy endings. I know that. I've counseled enough women to know that not everyone makes it out. Some women go back to their abusers. Some lose their children permanently. Some don't survive. That reality sits heavy on my heart. But mine does have a happy ending, and I believe yours can too. It takes courage. It takes help. It takes believing that you deserve better even when the world has told you otherwise. But it's possible. I'm living proof. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share it. Not because I want attention, but because somewhere out there is a woman who needs to know she's not alone, that there's a way out, that second chances are real. Share it with someone who's struggling. Share it with someone who's lost hope. Share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness still exists in this world. Maybe it'll be the thing that saves them. Maybe it'll be the spark that helps them believe they can change their life. And if you're here because you want to hear more stories like this, stories about ordinary people facing impossible situations and finding their way through, please subscribe to Every Smile Hides a Story. Every day, we share real experiences that remind us we're all more alike than different, that everyone is fighting battles we can't see, that compassion is the most powerful force we have. Your subscription helps us reach more people, and maybe, just maybe, one of these stories will be the thing that changes someone's life. It costs you nothing but a moment of your time, but for someone else, it might mean everything. It might be the story that finally convinces them to make that phone call, to leave that abusive relationship, to believe they deserve better. Thank you for listening to mine. Thank you for seeing me, not as the desperate woman who stole to feed her children, but as a person who survived, who grew, who found her way back to light. We all deserve to be seen that way. We all deserve second chances. We all deserve to know that our worst moments don't define us. I want to tell you about something that happened last month, because it brought everything full circle in a way I never expected. I was at the community center, leading a support group for women in crisis. There were 8 women that day, sitting in a circle in our small meeting room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone had brought cookies, but they sat untouched on the table. Nobody had much appetite when sharing their darkest moments. We were going around the circle, each woman introducing herself and explaining what brought her there. Then it was the turn of a young woman in the corner. She was probably 19, maybe 20, thin, with dark circles under her eyes. She held herself like someone expecting to be hit, shoulders hunched, head down, making herself as small as possible. It was a posture I recognized instantly because I'd worn it myself for years. "My name is Carmen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I've been stealing from my employer to feed my baby. My boyfriend takes all my money and..." She couldn't finish. She just broke down crying, her whole body shaking with sobs, and I saw myself in her so clearly it hurt. I saw the shame, the desperation, the belief that she was a bad person who deserved everything happening to her. I saw the hopelessness that comes from being trapped with no way out. I got up and sat beside her, put my arm around her shoulders, let her cry. "I stole too," I said quietly. "I stole from the family I worked for. I hated myself for it every single day. But Carmen, you're not a bad person. You're a person in a bad situation. And there's a difference." She looked up at me, eyes red and swollen. How did you get out?" So I told her. I told her about Paco, about losing my children, about standing on that roof wanting to die. I told her about Yvonne showing up at the shelter, about the long road back to dignity. I told her it wasn't easy, that some days I still struggled, but that it was possible, that she could do it too. After the meeting ended, Carmen stayed behind. We talked for another hour. I connected her with Patricia, the lawyer who'd helped me. I gave her the number for a women's shelter I trusted. I told her about therapy, about building a support system, about taking things one day at a time. And when she left, there was something different in her eyes. Not hope, exactly. It was too soon for that. But maybe the possibility of hope. A crack in the wall of despair. I drove home that evening thinking about how far I'd come. 5 years ago, I was Carmen. Broken. Terrified. Stealing to survive. And now I was the person offering the hand up. Being someone else's Yvonne. The thought made me cry. Good tears. Grateful tears. Tears for the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. When I got home, Yvonne was in the kitchen making dinner. Mateo was at the table doing homework, his tongue sticking out in concentration. Sophia was in the living room, building an elaborate castle out of blocks. It was so normal, so beautifully ordinary, this life I'd built from ashes. "How was your day?" Yvonne asked, the way he always did. I thought about Carmen, about the 8 women in that circle, about all the women still trapped in situations I'd escaped, about Andrea and our book project, about the long journey from that shelter to this kitchen. "It was good," I said. "I think I might have helped someone today." He smiled at me, that warm smile that still made my heart skip. "You help someone every day, Yosani. That's who you are. But that's not who I always was. That's who I became because someone gave me a chance. That's the part people don't always understand. We don't transform in isolation. We transform because someone sees us, really sees us, and chooses to help anyway. We transform because someone believes in us even when we've stopped believing in ourselves." I think about Senora Dolores sometimes, Yvonne's mother. She never knew about the stealing. Yvonne kept it from her, knowing she'd never understand. She never knew that her housekeeper was taking things from her house, that her son had fallen in love with me, that we'd eventually marry. When Yvonne told her about our relationship, she was furious. She said terrible things about me, about my background, about how I was using him for money. She threatened to cut him off, to write him out of her will. Yvonne didn't flinch. "Then write me out," he said, "because I'm not giving her up. She's the best person I know, and if you can't see that, that's your problem, not mine." Eventually, Senora Dolores came around, not because she had a change of heart about people like me, but because she realized Yvonne wasn't backing down. She tolerates me now, treats me with cold politeness at family gatherings. I don't love her, but I don't hate her either. I understand that she's a product of her world, just like I was a product of mine. The difference is, I had someone willing to help me escape my world. She's still trapped in hers, but her grandchildren adore her, which is strange to watch. Mateo and Sophia don't see the prejudice, the condescension. They just see Abuela who brings them expensive gifts and lets them eat sweets. Children are good at seeing the best in people, even when adults have forgotten how. Andrea and I finished our book proposal last week. We're meeting with another publisher next month, one with a bigger reach than the first. The working title is still Two Mothers, but we've expanded it to include not just our stories, but the stories of other women we've met along the way. Carmen agreed to let us include her story, anonymously, of course. So did 3 other women from my support group. The book isn't just about abuse and poverty and survival. It's about the people who help, the Yvonnes of the world, and how one act of kindness can ripple outward in ways we never imagine. It's about the importance of seeing people, really seeing them, beyond their circumstances and their mistakes. It's about second chances and the courage it takes to accept them. Andrea and I have also started talking about opening our own women's shelter. It's ambitious. We'd need funding, space, staff, but we have connections now. Yvonne knows people in finance who might donate. Patricia knows judges and social workers who could refer women to us. The community center has offered to partner with us. It's a long-term project, maybe 2 or 3 years away, but we're working toward it. We want to create a place where women can come without judgment, where they can bring their children, where they can learn skills and rebuild their lives. We want to create the place we wished had existed when we needed it most. I've been thinking a lot lately about forgiveness. Not forgiving Paco. I'm not sure I'll ever fully forgive him, and I'm learning that's okay. But forgiving myself, for the stealing, for not leaving sooner, for exposing my children to that environment, for all the ways I failed before I finally found my way out. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, says self-forgiveness is the hardest kind. You can intellectually understand that you did the best you could with what you had, she told me. But feeling it in your heart is different. That's the work. And it is work. Every day I have to choose to forgive myself. Every day I have to remind myself that I'm not that terrified woman stealing spoons anymore. I'm someone who survived, who learned, who grew. I'm someone who takes that pain and transforms it into helping others. That has to mean something. Mateo asked me the other day why I work so much with sad ladies, as he calls them. We were driving home from soccer practice, just the 2 of us, and he'd been quiet for a while before asking. Because I used to be a sad lady too, I told him, and someone helped me. So now I help other people. He thought about this, watching the streetlights pass. Was my other dad mean to you? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. We'd talked about Paco in simple terms before, but never like this. Never so directly. Yes, I said. He was. He wasn't a good person to me or to you. Do you think he's still mean? I don't know, baby. I hope he got help. I hope he became better, but I don't think about him much anymore. Mateo nodded, satisfied with this answer. I'm glad we have Papa Ivan now. He's nice. Me too, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. That conversation stayed with me for days. I realized that Mateo's childhood, unlike mine, won't be defined by trauma. He'll remember some hard times, the shelter, the separation, but mostly he'll remember feeling loved and safe. He'll grow up knowing what a healthy relationship looks like. He'll grow up believing he deserves kindness. That's the greatest gift Yvonne and I can give him. Sophia is too young to remember any of the bad times. For her, this has always been her life. This house, this family, this security. Sometimes I watch her playing without a care in the world and feel overwhelmed with relief. She'll never know what it's like to go to bed hungry, to hear her parents fighting, to watch her mother get hit. She'll never carry those scars, unless I'm not careful, unless I let my own trauma bleed into her childhood. That's something Dr. Martinez and I work on constantly. How to process my past without projecting it onto my children. How to protect them without smothering them. How to teach them resilience without teaching them fear. It's a balance I'm still learning. Some days I get it right. Some days I overreact to small things because they trigger memories I haven't fully processed. But I'm trying. I'm conscious of it. And when I mess up, I apologize to them. I model taking responsibility, asking for forgiveness, doing better next time. These are things Paco never did. These are things my children deserve to see. Last Sunday we had a barbecue at our house. Andrea came with her family. Patricia came with her husband. Rosa from the shelter came with 2 of her daughters. Even Carmen came, tentatively, bringing her baby. The yard was full of people who'd survived terrible things, who'd clawed their way back to light, who'd chosen to keep living even when it seemed impossible. I stood on the porch watching everyone, smelling the charcoal from the grill, hearing the mix of Spanish and English and laughter. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Sophia was showing Carmen's baby her stuffed animals. Mateo and Andrea's son were kicking a soccer ball back and forth. The adults were talking, telling stories, building community. Ivan came up beside me, handed me a glass of lemonade. "Good turnout," he said. "Yeah," I agreed. Then, because I couldn't keep it in, "Thank you. For all of this. For everything." He shook his head. "You did this, Yosani. You built this life. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and created all this." Maybe he was right. Maybe we were both right. Maybe it takes both. Someone to open the door, and someone brave enough to walk through it. Maybe that's how all transformation happens. Not through individual heroism, but through connection. Through seeing each other and choosing to help. I've started speaking at schools sometimes, talking to teenagers about healthy relationships, about recognizing abuse, about asking for help. It's strange being in front of a classroom, me who barely finished high school myself. But the kids listen, especially the girls, especially the ones who sit in the back with their arms crossed, trying to look tough but whose eyes give them away. I see myself in those girls. I see the ones who are already in situations they don't know how to escape. After one talk, a girl came up to me, 15, maybe 16. "My mom's boyfriend hits her," she said quietly. "She won't leave. I don't know what to do." I gave her resources, phone numbers, websites. I told her it wasn't her job to save her mother, that she couldn't force someone to leave before they're ready. But I also told her to keep herself safe, to have a plan, to know she could call for help if things got dangerous. I gave her my card and told her to call me if she ever needed to talk. She did call, 2 weeks later. Her mother still hadn't left, but the girl needed someone to listen. We talked for an hour. I didn't have magic solutions. I just heard her, validated her fear and frustration, reminded her that she mattered too. Sometimes that's all we can do. Be present, be consistent, be someone who cares. I think about all the ways this story could have gone differently. If Ivan hadn't come to the shelter that day, if he'd called the police instead of offering help, if I'd been too proud or too afraid to accept his assistance, if the judge had decided I was unfit and never given me another chance at custody, if Paco had succeeded in finding us, if I'd stepped off that roof, any of those forks in the road could have led to tragedy, but they didn't. Somehow, against all odds, I made it through. We made it through. And now I have this life, this beautiful, ordinary life that still feels like a miracle some days. I have a husband who respects me, children who are thriving, work that matters. I have friends who understand my past without judging it. I have purpose. I have hope. But I also carry the weight of knowing how easily it could have gone the other way. How many women don't make it out? How many children grow up in the chaos I exposed my kids to? How many Carmens are out there right now, stealing from their employers, hating themselves, seeing no way forward? That weight sits on my shoulders every day. It's why I do this work. It's why I can't stop, even when it's exhausting, even when I bring the sadness home with me. Ivan understands this about me. He knows that my work isn't just a job. It's a calling, maybe even a debt I'm trying to repay. He never complains when I take calls at odd hours, when I bring women to stay with us temporarily, when I come home emotionally drained from hearing stories that echo my own. He supports it completely, because he understands that helping others is part of how I make sense of what happened to me. It's how I transform pain into purpose. Sometimes late at night, when everyone else is asleep, I go through old photos on my phone. Pictures from before, me and Paco, young and smiling, before everything went wrong. Me pregnant with Mateo, still hopeful. Me at the Corcuera's house, cleaning, not knowing Ivan was falling in love with me. Me at the shelter, hollow-eyed and defeated. Then I look at recent photos. Last Christmas morning, all of us in matching pajamas. Mateo's birthday party. Sophia's first day of kindergarten. Our wedding day. Pictures of a life I never imagined I'd have. The contrast is staggering. I barely recognize the woman in those early photos. She seems like a stranger, someone from a story I heard rather than lived. But she's not a stranger. She's me. She's the person I had to be to become who I am now. And I owe her something. I owe her remembering, honoring the pain she endured, using her story to help others. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Taking our broken pieces and making something meaningful from them. Not wasting the second chance we've been given. Not pretending the past didn't happen, but not letting it define our future either. Living in that tension between remembering and moving forward. Andrea and I talk about this often. How to hold both truths at once. How to acknowledge the trauma without being consumed by it. How to be grateful for where we are without forgetting where we came from. It's a daily practice, not a destination. Some days are easier than others. My name is Yosani, and this is my story. It's messy and painful and real, but it's also proof that no matter how dark things get, there's always hope, always a chance to begin again, always someone willing to extend a hand if we're brave enough to take it. I'm not special. I'm not uniquely strong or resilient. I'm just someone who survived, who accepted help, who did the hard work of healing. If I can do it, so can you. If I can go from stealing to feed my children, to helping other women escape similar situations, then transformation is possible for anyone. The key is believing you deserve it. Believing that your worst moments don't define you. Believing that people are more complex than their mistakes. Believing that kindness exists and that you're worthy of receiving it. Hold on to that. And if you can, be that for someone else. Be someone's Yvonne. Be the person who sees past the surface, who offers help without judgment, who believes in second chances. You might think you're just doing a small thing, offering a job, making a phone call, listening without criticism. But to someone drowning, that small thing might be the lifeline that saves them. That's what I learned from all of this, that we're all connected, that one person's kindness can ripple outward in ways we never imagine, that the smallest acts of compassion can literally save lives, that we all have the power to be someone's turning point, someone's reason to keep going, someone's hope. So use that power. Look for the people struggling around you. Ask how you can help. Offer grace instead of judgment. Choose compassion over convenience. Make the choice Yvonne made, to see a person's potential instead of just their problems. And if you're the one struggling, please hear this. You deserve help. You deserve kindness. You deserve a second chance. Your current situation doesn't have to be your forever situation. There is a way forward, even if you can't see it yet. There are people waiting to help you, even if you haven't met them yet. There is hope, even in the darkest moments. I know this because I lived it. I was Carmen. I was you. And now I'm here, on the other side, living a life I never dreamed possible. If I can make it, so can you. Don't give up. Keep going. Accept help when it's offered. Do the hard work. Believe you're worth saving. Because you are. You absolutely are. And remember, every smile hides a story. Every person you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about. So be kind. Be patient. Be the light in someone's darkness. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community where we share our stories and remind each other that we're not alone. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with someone who needs it. And come back tomorrow for another story. Another reminder that hope is real, that change is possible, that human kindness can overcome even the darkest circumstances. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my hope for you.